My father had a grocery store. We lived in the 20th district, which was sort of a lower middle class, working class district. I went to elementary school there. We had about, I would say, 80% Christian children and 20% Jewish children. I was a very happy-go-lucky child there. I never felt any sort of discriminations. We were all friends, and as young children, I even observed some of the Christian holidays with them in school, because this is the way it was. But I was always fully aware that I was Jewish.
We lived in a pretty inner city district, in the 9th district, which was, how shall I say, mixed. For instance, the apartment house where I was born and lived the first 12 years of my life was very interesting. It was like a little city in itself. It wasn't just people of one religion or of one economic level. It was very mixed. There was a cobbler who lived there, and there were the people that owned a beautiful bookstore downtown, and there was a doctor, and there were some retired old ladies that lived evidently quite comfortably. And so it was a great mixture of people, Jewish and not Jewish, and younger and older, and wealthier and poorer. And this is rather unusual. I don't think you find that here necessarily. I don't know whether it's today that way anymore. But Vienna was known to be pretty integrated in living anyway. We lived an average life. We were not well-to-do. We lived in an apartment. My mother was a couturière, a dressmaker, a master dressmaker, and she had her studio in the apartment. My maternal grandmother lived with us, and in spite of this modest way of living, we had a maid, like everybody had a maid. That didn't mean that we were wealthy, but there was a maid. I attended schools. My elementary school was a Franz Schubert Schule in Vienna.
My family and my brother, Kurt, who is 9 years older than I am, lived in a very lovely, spacious apartment in a 4-story apartment house on the Nickelgasse number 1 in the 2nd district of Vienna. Our apartment was on the 2nd floor, door number 7. I had a wonderful, very, very extremely happy childhood. My family, the household of my parents was strictly Orthodox kosher. We belonged to one of the most Orthodox synagogues in the 2nd district of Vienna. It was called the Schiffschule, which it was located in the Schiffgasse or Schiff Street. As a child, I had a group of really incredible boys and girls as friends when I grew up. My parents, although being very Orthodox and religious, they were very tolerant and very broad-minded, and they never objected that I would have non-Jewish friends. So they didn't mind, they didn't object of me going even to, I remember so well, going to a midnight mass Christmas Eve, because they felt, well, that's part of education, world education. And I remember that so well, and I also remember helping my non-Jewish friends decorate the Christmas trees, and that was fun. And then in turn, for Passover, my mother made matzo balls by the hundreds of dozens, and we gave to all of our non-Jewish friends plates of matzo balls with instructions how to cook them. And so it really was a very liberal and wonderful childhood for me.
Holidays were observed. I really felt deprived not being able to have a Christmas tree, because to me that looked very beautiful. Religious instruction was part of the school curriculum, and so the teachers came into the school and the class divided up into the three religions. There were maybe 2 children in the class that were without religion, and it was called confessionslos, which means without affiliation.
I remember that dreadful Friday of March the 11th, 1938, a night I shall never forget. My father and brother came home from shul, from the synagogue, and Friday night dinner was served, and my grandmother didn't come that Friday night because we all had an inkling something was brewing, something I mean, after all, we read the newspapers, we knew what was coming. But and I must tell you, in our household on Friday night or Shabbos, the radio was never played, but that night the radio was turned on because we needed to know what was coming. And sure enough, we heard the speech of the then president of the country of Austria, Dr. Kurt von Schuschnigg, where he told the country that he is surrendering Austria to Hitler and the Germans. He does not want to shed any Austrian blood, therefore he is surrendering. And when we heard that, my mother was just horrified. The first thing, and I remember this so well, she said, well, this is the end. This is the end for us. This is the beginning of the end. And of course, that was a terrible situation. No one knew what to do next. Where do we go from here? And it was unbelievable. You cannot imagine the instant change in people. It seemed like the Austrians were ready for it. It seemed like the Austrians, policemen even, had their banner in their pockets to put on their arm with the big swastika. It hurt me as a child so terribly how my non-Jewish friends immediately were told that they couldn't play with me, they couldn't call me, and how they turned against me. And that was the day of the Anschluss, the famous Anschluss. Well, things were so bad that, for instance, my brother, who was already studying at the university, medical school, could not go to the university to pick up his papers because Jews were not permitted to enter the building. I couldn't go and play in my beloved park, which was just 15, 20 minutes away from my house, because there was a big sign on the entrance posted, dogs and Jews are not permitted. Benches in the park had painted overnight. This all happened overnight.
And then, of course, in March of 1938, Hitler invaded Austria, and I remember that night very clearly. It was a Friday night, and I used to go to services on Friday night. I insisted on going, and my parents, evidently knowing that something was up, absolutely forbade me to go. You can't possibly. So I stayed home, and as we sat there and listened to the radio, we realized what was happening. The troops were marching into Austria. They were received with open arms. All this talk about Hitler annexing Austria is really just talk. They were well prepared. They were in uniform already. And even as a 17-year-old, I realized that my life was to change completely. We knew that right away.
It was a Friday night, and we came from the synagogue, and that was the question about Schuschnigg abdicating. And after services, we had dinner, and then I went to my friend's house, and there we heard on the radio Schuschnigg's abdication, and they were playing the hymn. I never forget this. With a violin, you know. That's, I don't know, you know, it was called Gott erhalte. That was the hymn of Austria. And the violin played it, and Schuschnigg abdicated and said, God bless Austria. That was, then they marched in. I dressed usually in a skirt and a blue sweater and a white blouse. I looked like the other BDM, the Bund Deutsche Mädchen. So personally, I had no trouble, you know. But it was terribly traumatic. You just could not possibly understand it here, that you have the feeling that there is no law for you. None. In Austria, it was much worse than Germany, because it happened overnight. In Germany, it took from 1933 up. By the 1938, they were taught by the Austrian how to be real Nazis. Because in 1933 it happened in Germany, and they lived quite comfortable in 1937. They didn't even think of leaving because they thought maybe it'll change. So my father, they went into the store and confiscated whatever they wanted. It was a free for all. And he was in the Austrian army, so he held his certificate in front of the store. They should leave him alone. But it didn't help. So they closed the store up.
We lived there until somebody came and wanted our apartment. Yeah. Somebody who had a right to demand, to request. And so we had to leave, and we left everything actually there in the apartment and moved to my aunt's apartment, which was actually nicer than ours and bigger, and she lived there alone. She was widowed at that time. And it was in the same district, in the same area. And we lived with her. The four of us moved in there, and from there my father was being deported, only men's transport, and we stayed there until somebody came and wanted that apartment as well. No. And then we had to move again. You know, when people are asking, how could they let themselves be marched into the camps and all that? And people have absolutely no idea of the gradual closing in, of the gradual dehumanization. Mm-hmm. I mean, at first you leave your apartment and you go to another apartment, which isn't so bad. And then eventually the fear of raids, of constant raids, and so already had gone, and this one had gone, and that one had gone. So it was diminishing, and the circle was drawing closer and closer to us. And we were one of the very late departures. We were shipped out in October of 42, the four of us, my mother, my aunt, and my grandmother, and I, were taken and sent to Theresienstadt, to Teresin, because she worked for the Jewish community. And usually people were sent to Theresienstadt from Vienna if they had any connection either with the Jewish community or if they were war veterans from the First World War. Arrival there was really, I would say, traumatic. I don't remember the train ride, but I remember when we got there. And they put us into houses. I don't know whether you know about Terezin. It was a garrison town.
Yes.
And it was a walled city of 1 square kilometer. The Nazis considered it evidently ideal for a camp because it was self-contained. And the civilian population had to leave. They put us into this house, formerly a private house, and we had to go up to the attic. And it was the most horrible thing. I remember, first of all, it smelled vile from some disinfectant. And there was a bundle lying there in the hallway, it turned out to be a corpse. And upstairs, when we came up, there were people there, and sick and horrible. It was terrifying. It was the first time that we were really separated from a civilized environment.